Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Volume 8, Chapter 4. Hopefully we can get through 4, 5, and 6. I thought about going further, but something happened at the end of 6 that I think is going to take some talking. But yes, just to give a pre-warning here, I have just gotten over a really bad case of sickness over the last 48 hours. So if I sound off, if I look a little tired, it's because of that, but Mushoku Mondays must continue on, and I cannot delay recording any longer and be able to actually edit it before then, so we're doing it. We're doing it, so please be patient with me. But as usual, thanks to everybody for dropping by for the premieres, all those that support the channel, those that check out all the Mushoku Mondays. Your guys' support means so much to me. All those that go down below and hit the like button, leave me a comment just to kind of get us in the algorithm, those that share out to your friends. And yes, of course, everybody that supports us through Patreon, our tips link, and memberships of the channel itself. So with all that said, let's jump into this. There's going to be quite a bit to talk about, like I said, with especially Chapter 6, but there's a little bit in the 4th chapter about spells and stuff that's going to be super interesting, so let's jump right into it. Oh, we have Chapter 4, the beginning of my school life. I thought that began earlier, but sure, okay. But yes, we go through Rudeus's daily routine. He gets up. They kind of go over like a little One Punch Man reference with like 100 squats and push-ups and like 10-kilometer running and everything like that. But of course, like the One Punch Man thing, he does not want to lose his hair, so he's not cool with that part. During his jogging, he of course spotted a girl jogging with a hat covering her face pulled over her eyes. It's gonna keep dragging it on. They're just gonna keep dragging this on over and over again. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, at least it's insinuating that this is, of course, Sylphie, because that's her daily routine, is putting on this cap and doing her run. I'm assuming she didn't spot him. He would do magic training in his room, making figurines, more as a refresher for Zenoba, who kept hounding him to make him a figure. Then he would go have breakfast with Zenoba. Next was his stop to the library, which he would research the teleportation incident, which has gotten really interesting recently. Around noon, he would have lunch with Zenoba, and he would help Zenoba with any sort of questions that he has from his class. He does note that Il and Elise would actually come by and have lunch with them every now and then, but particularly that she's not interested in Zenoba. I feel so bad for Zenoba. Of all the people that she'll bet anything that moves, but not Zenoba. She says particularly that he doesn't look like a good man in her eyes. I wonder if it's that she knows that he's a cursed child and she's afraid of him? Or if he just... I mean, the dude looks like a dork. Be perfectly honest, I love the dude, but he does look like a dork. It's the bowl cut thing. I'm sorry, the bowl cut thing. But we do get a note that she's been quenching her thirst at night at town. He mentions a couple things about the cafeteria. They had Nanahoshiyaki, which, yes, we've noted that to be in the Dragon King realm, this Nanahoshiyaki stuff. And also, something similar to something that tasted like curry called curry soup. That's when we get into some of the classes that Rudeus has been taking. Afternoons, he would take classes for foundations in healing magic, divine magic, and barrier magic. Of course, divine magic being something that's really good against ghost types and gaseous beasts. He thought that it would be something similar to something like disturbed magic and using mana in its rawest form to strike an opponent. But just using pure mana doesn't do any damage. There had to be something more to it. For now, Rudeus was just focusing on learning the theory behind it and memorizing each incantations. I like that it's not as simple, he goes to this class and he immediately gets it. He's sort of trying to figure it out as he goes along. But not only that, but it almost figures like based on what he's talking about how it works, he doesn't want to just learn what they're telling him. Because as we mentioned before with Sylphie, when she was going to classes, she's mentioned the idea that when she goes there, they're talking about combining magics and they don't know how it works. And that Rudeus had it figured out. Rudeus doesn't really look at the stuff the same way that everybody else does based on his experience when he first learned magic. And as we'll learn later on, there seems to be a lot in the realm of magical studies that seems to contradict everything we've learned before, at least how it's written in literature. But yes, Rudeus learned that you needed to change the type of magic you were using to counter your opponent. So to be skilled as a divine magician, you had to analyze your opponent. And surely he wondered, that applied outside of divine magic as well. He knows that some first-rate swords fighters could cut through a ghost in one strike. No need to analyze it. But Rudeus hasn't seen that. Again, this is one of those... It just seems like this entire volume seems to constantly hit on this idea that swordsmen seem to have an advantage over magic users. Again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, it does feel like they're still figuring this stuff out. And I mean, even with the statement that the president said at the speech was this idea of, well, yes, swords fighters have this amazing ability, but magicians have their own uses, and we're rising up. And I think it's a lot to do with them trying to figure this stuff out. If you think about it, yes, the elves originally created magic and humankind kind of adopted it and evolved it, but it just seems like they're still trying to figure things out. Yes, again, some people stand out from the crowd as being exceptional, like Rudius and Silent Fits and all that kind of stuff, but it's still constantly pointing out, at least in this volume, swords fighters can do this. Well, divine magic, you have to analyze your opponent and counter it. Well, swords fighters can just slash them in one shot. It's again, pressing heavily on the idea that swords fighters are exceptional compared to magicians in a lot of ways. Now that's when we get into barrier magic, which I found a lot of this stuff really interesting, and it sort of gets into this bigger picture that I have with magic as a whole. With barrier magic, it's creating a protective wall using magic circles. But when you reach a beginner tier, you can actually create through incantations rather than using circles. Then there's magic shields, which have the power to isolate flames or cold to reduce the effects. At this point, Rudius kind of wonders, is there a shield against physical attacks? And his teacher informed him that yes, I got a huge kick out of this. The Millis Faith owned rights to divine and barrier magics, leaving the university to only be able to teach basic levels. Physical shields was an intermediate tier spell, which yes, this teacher knew how to use it, but would be hunted down and put on trial if he taught it. What? It's like some kind of copyright laws that they have for using spells. And it was only 2 years ago they were given allowance to teach the basics. Interesting thing to note here. It specifies that it wasn't until 2 years ago that they were able to even start to even train beginners in barrier. Who also started coming to the school 2 years ago? Cliff Grimoire. Where's Cliff from? Millis. So it does make you, and specifically, what did Cliff say that he was in barriers? He was beginner, and he'll soon to be intermediate. It makes you wonder if they're allowed to teach because they want Cliff to be able to learn that. Now, this gets into this bigger, grand story about why is Cliff even here? And this is funny that I didn't notice this, or I didn't note this when I was talking about it in the last video, because they were specifying that though some sects within the Millis Church did not like this entire school. They didn't like this magic teaching school. It was a Templar specifically. So obviously those that support Cliff is not within that sect. Otherwise he wouldn't be allowed up here. But at least gives the idea that there are some within the Millis Church that's okay with the University of Magic, because that's why Cliff's there. Cliff wouldn't be allowed there if that was not okay. But at least makes me wonder, did they specifically give the rights to allow to be taught barriers just because Cliff was coming here? And so Cliff can further his learning in barriers? Or is this completely just, we've never been able to learn barriers until 2 years ago, and then suddenly Cliff shows up 2 years ago and just, oh, that's just a weird coincidence? It does make me believe that there has to be a reason that the two happen at the same time. And makes me wonder, this guy gets sent up here or just even allowed just for the sake of teaching Cliff, and they just kind of just opened up to a full class, which makes me wonder that once this is all over, once Cliff has been graduated, will they even allow it to be continue to be taught? But again, it's still a big question mark in the idea. It had to be like a specific group within the Millis Church that is supporting Cliff coming here that would be okay with that coming up here. Otherwise, who would even approve that? Because again, if you think about it, if the Millis Church has like the rights to barrier magic, why would they even allow it to even go anywhere else? That's like their baby. Just like the whole, magic resistant bricks. It's their baby. Why would you let it go out? Because of this, instead of focusing on training any higher than that, they would actually train on how to break the barriers instead. He goes on to explain that Saint tier and above could create barriers that combine both physical and magical proofing. There was also barriers that would actually protect oneself or lock something inside of a barrier. Which yes, Roxy at some point went through explaining Rudius all this stuff about barriers, but he tuned most of it out, so he needed to review it. Which, by the way, let me note, Rudius, how dare you ignore Roxy? Of all of his worship of Roxy, he never listened to her in classes. Terrible. I guess he was technically too busy looking up her skirt. That could probably be it. But no, I got a huge kick out of this whole segment. I keep hitting this here and there, and I've talked to people on Discord before. I really love how this world itself is so... It's got like its own copyrights and its own marketing systems and stuff. We've hit heavily on the idea that Throughout the series, you keep seeing things that kind of hint at this marketing scheme done by this magical school. How these books would be basically given out and they all were pretty much advertising this school. And then when you get there, you're learning about how there's restrictions to what they can teach because the Millis continent has like the rights to it. And then of course the magical Renoa has the rights to creating resistant bricks. Everybody, there's like copyrights in this world. It's almost bizarre in that regard. And yes, this is another example of it. You're not allowed to teach anything beyond the basics of barriers because the Mills continent, they have control over it. And it's kind of scary to think about that there is a country that can sort of keep others from learning things. You would think that the Renoa University of Magic wouldn't care. They're way up here. What, are they going to go track them down? It's sort of indicating the idea that if this teacher, who even knows this stuff, if he uses it or teaches it, they will come hunt him down. So maybe it's more of an idea that they're not going to attack the kingdom or anything, but they're going to come in there and probably assassinate him directly. Take him out for teaching this. Which is, again, kind of bizarre. It is sort of bizarre that they would actually uphold that and not just teach it just for their own benefit. But no, maybe in the behind the scenes, secretly, they're still teaching it. It seems like a really significantly beneficial thing for them to learn. But I don't know, maybe someday Rudius will go back down to Millis because, again, that's where his mother's from. That's where his aunt is at. Maybe he can learn it later on. After classes, Rudius once again returns to the library to research teleportation. Sadly, literature with detail was difficult to find as teleportation magic was labeled as a forbidden art. And we kind of mentioned this before quite a while back when we were talking about Rudius wanting to transport from the Demon Continent and just go straight over to the Central Continent. And he was being pointed out then that ever since the war, that's been forbidden. And yes, as you can see with the displacement incidents, for good reason. It seemed like the one that Fitz told him about previously was probably the most extensive one out there. But yes, that was Rudius' daily routine. And unfortunately, his healing classes had no subject related to ED, and there was no literature on it. He felt there was no sign he'd recover. That is until one day something happened. At the library, he was approached by Master Fitz. Rudius, mind if I sit beside you? Sit beside me? That makes it seem like we're strangers. Here, please have my seat. I warmed it for you. Ahaha, sorry about the trouble. Are you making any progress? I now know that there is apparently other incidents in the past that resemble what happened in the Fatoa region. That's a big shocker. Apparently this is something that's happened before. To be fair, it wasn't the same scale as something like the Fatoa displacement, but there were cases where people abruptly disappeared and then one day suddenly reappeared. Sometimes in another place or sometimes in the same place. It seemed to have happened occasionally. At this point, he suddenly realized that Fitz had a book about teleportation. Are you perhaps helping me? No, I'm looking into displacement incident. Did Princess Ariel order you? Not quite, he gave a chuckle. To tell the truth, one of my acquaintances went missing during the incident. I'm not sure what to say. Oh, I recently found out they're still alive. Oh, really? Yeah, I've been researching teleportation up until then thinking if I could figure out the pattern behind where people are teleported to, then it could make finding them easier. That's why I looked into it. Incredible as ever, Master Fitz. That's an insightful idea. This is actually a really interesting idea. I never thought about this. Of course, it seems very difficult how you'd be able to map that out, but I guess with all the information that they could probably get from the refugee camp on where people were found, yes, you probably would have difficulty finding out exactly where people were placed. But yeah, if you can essentially figure out, like, if there's a pattern to how everybody was dispersed, if it was like a perfect star or something like that, or maybe it was clumps where people were at least narrows down things. You could essentially find out that, yes, say in the Demon Continent, everybody was around Rikarisu or something like that. There was nobody else in the Demon Continent except for right there. Then it at least tells you I don't have to worry so much about searching everywhere else. It's actually a really interesting idea. And yes, there's a possibility that figuring out where people were put could possibly lead to some sort of reverse engineering of the process. Figuring out things like how much mana was needed in order to transport that many people to those great distances. And yes, maybe get an idea of how far out they can be pressed. Again, it's a lot of theorizing, but it'd be very interesting to sort of dig into that more. No, it's not really that special. Besides, I wasn't able to search for them in the end anyways. Rudius assumed that Fitz was probably super busy helping Ariel after she was losing her position. That's not your fault. Rudius felt that Fitz, despite the fact that he was fulfilling his duties, still found time to do research. He had his own life that he was living, but he was still doing what he could. Being a bodyguard, student council activities, all the while researching the displacement. It made him incredible in Rudius' eyes. And thankfully, Fitz was perfectly fine with sharing whatever he had gathered so far. Though he claims that he's not as fast at discovering things as Rudius. Rudius, there's something I want to talk to you about. At this point, Fitz looked down. Yes, what is it? I'd like you to let me help you with your research of the displacement incident. No. In fact, I should be one assisting you. I'm the one who just begun my research recently, and I don't even have much information on the topic. Fitz replied, but I don't have that much time to spend on it. Even if we partner up, most of the work will fall onto you. Does that bother you? Having someone like me who just comes by occasionally butting into your research? It doesn't bother me. I look forward to working together. Yeah, me too. They shook hands and Fitz gave a toothy grin. His face, combined with his soft hands, made Rudius's heart pound. Seriously, having these feelings for a guy, he thought his emotions were getting off track. They're just gonna keep doing this. They just keep doing this. They're just gonna keep doing this. I don't like this writer anymore. There's obviously something really making Rudius doki doki. Obviously something making him doki doki. Fitz is just a really good looking dude, right? On the way back to the dorms, they had some small talk. Fitz was shocked at how Zenoba was following him like a puppy. Zenoba was a troublemaker when he first arrived and fought with everyone. Well, that tells me about the whole thing about him settling down. He settled down when Linnea and Priscilla did him in. With that said, Fitz warned Rudius to be careful around Linnea and Priscilla. And if they ever seen Fitz with Rudius, it might cause him problems because, yes, they don't like Fitz anymore. And of course, since Rudius had beat Fitz, this sort of put him high on the power struggle. Though Rudius kind of downplays himself, believing that if Fitz knew about disturbed magic now, he'd probably be able to beat him. Rudius never really kind of puts himself on a pedestal. I've always noticed that. Still, Fitz thought that Rudius would be okay. Rudius was the first person to beat him one-on-one. But in return, Rudius felt that Fitz needed to be praised. Honestly, Rudius was the first one to beat him, and that would typically make people very angry. You've lost your status of being undefeated. Why wasn't Fitz frustrated? It didn't make any sense to Rudius. But yes, of course, Fitz thought that disturbed magic was absolutely amazing. And despite the fact that him knowing disturbed magic would probably lead him to beating Rudius, Rudius was still open with the idea of helping Fitz learn it, which I thought was pretty cool. He points out specifically that despite this as being a kind of advantage that Rudius has against Fitz if they ever dueled, he didn't hesitate. Like, this guy has been doing so much cool stuff for him. Fitz is like going out of his way to assist him with this displacement incident, the teleportation research. He didn't hesitate. Like, he just, yeah, sure, I'll teach you. Which I thought was really, really cool. Honestly, if you think about it, like, if you, at least from what we know so far, like, everything that Rudius has gone through, especially with this new life, Fitz is like the first person that just goes out of his way to just confront Rudius on a regular basis and try to help him with whatever he wants. Doesn't seem like there's any sort of desire for anything in return. After some time, they go to leave, and they drop by the women's dorm. That's where Fitz decides to part ways with Rudius, mention the fact that he has business with Ariel to do. And Rudius honestly felt like this might be the key to what he needs to do to save himself from this ED. Like, maybe I can use Fitz as my way to infiltrate the Palace of Women, and that will be my way of fixing my issues that I have down there. Which I thought was kind of funny. But no, for the moment, he really doesn't feel like he can see any sort of purpose with Mangod's words. But no, this was the start of Rudius and Fitz's investigation together. He was really surprised the two of them had gotten so close. He figures it's because of how friendly Fitz was. Even still, Fitz was full of mystery. Again, going to my previous statement about the fact that how Fitz is so forward with him, constantly going to see him, sitting down next to him, just having these casual talks with them, that toothy grin, which I think just, toothy grin sounds so weird. I know what they're going for there, but toothy sounds so weird. Over their many discussions together, Rudius had discovered and failed to learn about a lot of things about Fitz. He had reasons for always wearing sunglasses, but he couldn't tell Rudius. He of course stayed in the female dorms as Ariel's bodyguard, which yes, made sense to Rudius because it seems like a lot of maids and bodyguards of nobility and stuff would be allowed to stay at the dorms with their masters. But still, if they caused any problems, it would be the responsibility of the master. It seemed like Princess Ariel, with her status and her charisma, Fitz wasn't treated like a manservant, but rather with respect from other people. According to Ellen and Elise, Fitz was really popular with the girls. While yes, newbies squealed whenever they seen Luke, once they gained a couple experience levels, their hearts trembled for Fitz's soft side profile. Honestly, personally, I never got the appeal to Luke. I just can't fathom the whole concept of having this one guy that all these girls are swarming on and that you would want to join them. It just, I don't know, maybe I'm weird. I'll never understand a lady, I guess. Rudius also realized that despite everyone saying that Fitz was quiet, the whole silent Fitz thing, he spoke to Rudius normally. Rudius assumed that despite him claiming he's shy, maybe it's just more than the fact that they were on the same wavelength. We cut to another conversation between the two of them. Actually, your last name wouldn't happen to be Ryback, would it? Huh? Ryback? Isn't that the last name of the second North God? No way. Not at all. Besides, I don't even have a surname. I'm not nobility or anything. There you are, being all humble. Be honest. You're actually extremely good cook, aren't you? I can cook, but what does it have to do with anything? Fitz completely missed his joke, but he still chuckled. The man of mystery, Fitz, was laughing. Rudius honestly didn't know why Fitz was helping him. He wasn't about to be ungrateful and pry into the secrets of someone who was helping him out. He followed the man god's advice, and that led to him meeting Fitz. If he kept on this path, he'd find out the cure to his illness. And that is the end of chapter 4. Like I said, a lot of really good insight into the world of magic, barrier specifically and divine magic. It seems like it's just really scratching the surface of divine magic, honestly, but obviously a lot of this chunk of this chapter is really in his relationship with Fitz as it's slowly growing. And again, really getting an insight into the idea that Fitz was looking for somebody, found them, and that Rudius himself is feeling very comfortable with Fitz, gaining a friendship, and like I said, almost a one-sided benefit relationship, as Fitz is going out of his way to help Rudius, and Rudius is getting very comfortable because of that. And yes, the fact that he keeps having doki doki feelings with Fitz. And we'll get more into the person that Fitz was looking for later on. But first, chapter 5. Let's get into Zenoba. More Zenoba is always good for Andrew. Chapter 5, An Unreachable Power, Part 1. We start things off with a little recap of Zenoba. Zenoba Chiron, the third prince of the Chiron Kingdom, blessed child with power from birth, and a figure-caressing pervert. He's a figurine otaku who took things too far. While he lost control with his monstrous power when he got excited, he never handled figures roughly. Rudius had once interrupted Zenoba in his room, naked, wrapping his arms around a stone sculpture. Upon noticing Rudius, he quickly dressed himself and bowed, apologizing for the unsightly display. This is probably what was from the PV. I remember the shot from the PV and him sitting there rubbing it. His love was abnormal, but hugging a statue of metal risked frostbite in this weather. You can't fake such dedication. Rudius couldn't judge him, as he did similar things in his previous life. Still, Rudius would not forgive him if he tried something similar to the goddess statue, the Roxy figurine, which made Rudius ponder what Zenoba did with that figurine, which I already know the answer to this because I briefly looked into the next chapter. Oh, my heart broken. My heart's broken. At this point, Zenoba begged Rudius to teach him how to make figurines. Rudius had been keeping him waiting for a long time, which to this point seems like it's frustrated Zenoba. But Rudius over time was trying to build a new one and kind of refresh himself. And it's been taking a long time, as he's kind of stated before. This is a very timely process. He's creating like little bits of it a day. But despite the fact that this training was going to be very rigorous, Zenoba's resolve was strong. He said that he would continue to push on even if he was spitting up blood. Yes, Rudius was set on fulfilling his promise, but he wasn't without another motive. Zenoba was royalty, which meant that he was rich. Having a pupil like that could lead to mass production and access to colors to paint them. Yes, Rudius wanted to create a mass production line of figurines to make lots and lots of money. He'd make a reserved figurine that was bundled with a book glorifying the superb tribe for their loyalty. The story of a gulf between the hero that the world would recognize and the man that it did not, which yes, Reserved. Reserved's hard work even though the people wouldn't accept him. He would also make a book lauding Roxy's achievements that bundled with a Roxy figurine. His plan was perfect. However, Zenoba was unable to do it. I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I could just see Zenoba as just being beat. Oh, poor boy. For one, Zenoba couldn't wield magic without incantations. And two, his total mana capacity was nowhere near enough. Honestly, voiceless casting is a very high level technique. Neither Edis or Ghislaine was able to pull it off when he taught him. And we'll kind of learn later on why that is. Besides Rudius, the only other people that he knew that could use voiceless casting was Orsted, Fitz, and Sylvie. The Academy once had an incantationless wind user, but he had passed away last year. As for mana capacity, creating figures was a way for Rudius to use up his endlessly increasing mana pool. But at the same time, that meant the process took a large amount of mana to pull it off. And over his time adventuring, that's when he realized how much different in his mana capacity he was to other adventurers. He honestly at first thought everybody else was just wasteful. And at first he thought that he maybe had like 5 times as much capacity as other people, but eventually, in reality, he realized that he had much, much more. This was obviously very devastating to Zenoba, as he pushed himself over and over. His face was like a skull with tears and snot streaming down. The thing he wanted the most to do, he had no talent for. And if you think about it, that's the whole reason he came here. That's the whole reason he was here for these earth magic classes. He was defeated, but Rudius wouldn't give up. Rudius wanted to try something different. Rudius created clay and instructed him that he would chisel it. The most primitive, reliable, but difficult method, which I kind of found funny right here. He's talking about how the fact that chiseling something is like the most difficult process, but it's like, yeah, but you're also considering the fact that what you just tried to teach him was actually much more complicated and more difficult for him to do. But it's so natural for Rudius at this point. But again, This process was a failure. Zenoba's strength made him unable to do any delicate work. But still, Zenoba had passion. He kept pushing and pushing until he created something. It wasn't good, but Rudeus wasn't going to laugh at it. Instead, Zenoba himself admitted to its poor quality. Poor Zenoba, I feel so bad. He's trying so hard. He wants to make a figurine so bad. Master, I can't do it. I can't make figurines like you. He sobbed in defeat. He was even more of a skeleton than he was the last 2 months. With this, Rudeus turned to Master Fitz for support. Rudeus felt bad divulging all of his pupils' failures, but he felt pity for Zenoba. You're creating figurines with magic? Fitz tilted his head, the two of them sitting side by side in the library. Rudeus demonstrated very discreetly, because they're still in the library and it's forbidden here, very discreetly he created a small little figurine. Very crude one. Whoa! What is that? That's amazing. Fitz tried to mimic what he just did, creating a clump of mud in the shape of a slime. Rudeus was honestly shocked about how quickly Fitz picked up on it. Still, Fitz sighed in defeat, being unable to form it properly. Realizing the difficulty in performing this, and Zenoba's lack of dexterous hands, Fitz pondered. He looked exceptionally dashing as he posed in thought. Finally, Fitz recalled a similar situation to someone in the Ashra capital. According to him, someone had the knowledge for something, but not the capabilities. So they purchased a slave, had someone teach them how to do it, and then the slave created what they wanted. Based on what you said, Zenoba likes figurines you make, and he'd like you to make more of them. So he said he wants to make them himself, right? Huh? Is that what I said? That's how it sounded to me. I'm sure that Zenoba would like you to be his personal figurine creator, but he knows that's impossible. So that's probably why he's asking for this instead. I don't actually think that's impossible, though. Yes, true. He could have stayed at Chiron and become Zenoba's personal figurine maker. It would probably be really good money. He even thought about asking what Fitz is being paid by Ariel, but he figured that'd be rude. Well, I'll try suggesting that option to Zenoba. Thank you for your advice. Yeah, no problem. Fitz gave a toothy grin again, which, again, shook Rudeus. I think that's going to be like the final thing to every single conversation with Fitz is a toothy grin and Rudeus feels doki doki. At this point, Rudeus returned to Zenoba, gave him the plan, buy a slave, teach him the technique, then have them create a figurine. Zenoba jumped on board immediately and began joyfully planning his purchase. Honestly, yes, Zenoba still wanted to do it himself. Having his master train a slave instead of him felt rude, but it seemed like he was relieved once he realized that Rudeus was proposing this and not himself. Later on, Rudeus updated Fitz on the whole situation, talking about their plans to go out to town to the slave trade. Turns out, Fitz had some time off on his hands. Oh, really? Yeah, so, since I don't have anything to do, I was thinking about going to town, but I don't really have anywhere particular to go, or any friends. So I'd be all alone. What is this, Fitz? Hint, hint, Rudeus, hint, hint. I don't have anywhere to go or friends. Can I please come with you? He seemed like he was desperately hinting at something. Would you like to come with us next month's break? You don't mind? I won't be in the way. Not at all. And as a way of thanking you for your advice, I'll treat you to a meal. Really? Then I'll happily take you up on an offer. And that's how the three of them headed to the slave market. Next time, a flower in both hands, a heart-pounding shopping adventure with the smiling elf and the prince with supernatural strength. Just kidding. And that is chapter 5. Again, most of this chapter is just really being heartbroken by what everything that Zenoba wanted and no longer being able to have it. Like, this has been his driving force ever since he met Rudeus, that he wanted to do exactly what Rudeus did. The first meeting with them, Rudeus behind this barrier, Zenoba outside of it, and him just wanting to know who made this figurine, how'd they make it, I need to find this person. And then Rudeus sort of gives him a hope. Yeah, I can teach it to you. I'll teach it to you someday. And Zenoba is heartbroken now because this is something he's been driving forward to this entire life. Like, this is the only thing he cares about. This is a guy that grew up only caring about dolls, and now he has figurines that he's caring about. These beautifully crafted things. And he's been striving to this. He went to the school. He's being experimented on just so that he can learn in earth magic classes. And then now he can't. Which, again, in chapter 6, we technically learn why that's the case, which I think is, everything's in chapter 6. Like, there's so much of this is in chapter 6. But it eventually does explain that Zenoba, in his current state, would never be able to do it. Like, there is something in this world, seemingly, according to somebody, that everything is kind of predicated on this certain time frame. And if you don't hit it then, don't bother. Which I think is kind of scary to Rudeus' situation and how if he didn't do what he did, he would never be this strong. but we'll get into that. But yes, Chapter 6, An Unreachable Power, Part 2. We cut to Fitz introducing himself to Zenoba. While Fitz seemed to be a bit nervous, Zenoba marched right up and offered his introductions, which led Rudius to kick him in the knee to make him stoop. Rudius normally wouldn't police someone and how they conduct themselves, but Fitz was an upperclassman, and this was the one that was presenting to him a resolve for his issue. Zenoba corrected himself, which made Fitz panic behind Rudius. But Fitz waved it off, claiming that royalty shouldn't lower their head. With introductions out of the way, they all headed to the Commerce District. While buying slaves was a quiet affair in the Middle Continent and in the Central Continent in the southern area, the northern territories were different. Most of the countries in this area legalized it, and many endorsed it. It was an essential part of the economy, so much that some wouldn't survive without it. A lot of slaves were orphans during the war, some were sold off by their parents because their crops failed, and some slaves sold themselves to save their families. There was even rumors of a slave ranch within the Thieves Guild. Many children in the eastern area of the northern region that were sold into slavery were typically bought up by the Northern Territories militia, mercenary bands, or government to serve as cannon fodder during the war. The Ashura Kingdom has a large connection with the slave trade, buying up the most best-looking or skilled. Being a rich country, it meant that, I mean, as bad it is to being a slave, it was a better option for most. At this point, we cut to the Ryum Group Slave Market, a beginner-friendly market that aimed at clientele with deep pockets, like Zenoba. Fitz was honestly surprised that it was conducted inside. Kind of assumed that it was something that was done outside. But it seemingly was obvious the moment they get inside, because typically when they sold these slaves, they were butt naked. And yes, having them outside meant that they were just going to get sick or die. Fitz's face was bright red at the sight. They, sure are big. So that's how they look. Rudius followed Fitz's gaze to a group of warriors. One at the center had a large chest. And yes, Rudius notes that typically you would think that a warrior with a big chest would be a little cumbersome, but he knew based on watching Ghislaine fight that that wasn't the case. I don't think that's what I don't think that's what Fitz is looking at, Rudius. I don't know, okay. Again, going back against chat zip it. Chat zip it. Okay, Fitz, attendant of Ariel. Now, you could argue that, you know, Sylphie is the attendant that would change Ariel, but we've seen in Fitz's chapter, Fitz changed Ariel. He's seen a rack before. He's not going to see a warrior's chest and go, oh my gosh, so that's what they look like. Fitz has seen a chest. And so what Fitz probably hasn't seen, I mean, he could have seen Luke's thing, I guess, but no, he's looking at a thing between the legs. But anyways, but no, Rudius obviously thinks that Fitz is a guy, so Fitz is looking at a chest, obviously. Could be, though. I don't know. Again, the split personality thing theory that I have from the last chapter, or the last video. Is this your first time coming here, Master Fitz? Huh? Oh yeah. Rudius seen Fitz's squirming as one of a virgin. He felt triumphant, being more experienced than his upperclassmen. As he lost his V card, he thinks he's the coolest thing ever. So Rudius, you're used to this? I'm sure you'll feel at ease once you get some experience. You sure about that? Hey, wait. That means you have experience? Fitz looked disappointed. Fitz looked disappointed that Rudius has experience. Edis beat ya. Edis beat you, Fitz. I'm sorry. Zenoba interrupted them. Their focus was a person with dexterous hands. Maybe a dwarf, because dwarves typically in this world were more dexterous with their hands. The other option was a child, even one experienced in magic. Young, as according to Fitz, here it is, it was easier to learn voiceless casting. Specifically, something almost impossible to learn beyond the age of 10. This is based on Fitz's experience with his master and professors. It was a conclusion that he came to. Also, if you used magic by the age of 5, your mana pool will drastically increase. Apparently, yes, those textbooks that Rudius had read a long time ago were incorrect, and a mana pool ceases to grow once a person reaches 10. Again, like everything that Rudius did way back here when he was super young, if he didn't do that back then, he would not be as powerful as he is now. And that kind of extends into the idea that you have... It's mind-boggling, because again, what Fitz is saying here is that everything they've taught is wrong. Everything he learned about in the textbooks that was talking about his limited mana pool and that it won't grow or anything like that, whatever you have is what you have, all that stuff was wrong. And if he didn't push back against it when he did, he would have never grown. Which, again, is one of those aspects of like, why are they teaching this? Is it just because Fitz and Rudius and Sylphie are a special case? and that the books themselves is a general idea of what mages should do and what they should expect with their mana pool and their capability? Or is somebody writing stuff incorrectly on purpose? Like, I've run into stories in the past where it's like, it almost feels like they purposely teach wrong to limit people. But it's like, why isn't this common knowledge? Why wouldn't they be teaching to if your children want to be magicians, hit them early. Hit them early, before they're 5. Get them learning. Unless, again, this is something that only fits these professors, a few professors, Rudius, his master. These people are the only ones that know, and that knowledge needs to get out there so that people can, advance magic. Because it seems like a limiter. As Rudius is like traveling around, adventuring, everybody else has no mana pool. What if everybody had the mana capability that Rudius had? You would have so many more people that would be at an even level with him and not running out of mana all the time. It seems like a very, very specific and very crucial thing that you would think mankind would have figured out at least a theory on. Like, somebody should at least have a theory on this, and that theory should be out there that if you want to train early. And if you don't train early, don't bother. Now, I understand the incantation list because that's such a rare thing, and who would teach it to your children early on, but at least the mana capability, at least the mana pool aspect. But yes, let's be perfectly honest. Once again, this is Fitz talking about when he was very young. He was taught voiceless casting and using magic, so he's the same as Rudius. Sure, Fitz. Yes, when Rudius inquired on his experiences using magic, Fitz explained that he was taught a long time ago after his master saved him. Sure, Fitz. So, your master can use voiceless casting too? Yes, he's amazing. I respect him deeply. That's great. I'd love to meet him. Fitz gave off a laugh. I'm pretty sure that's impossible. Really? I guess he must be a really important person. He's, not highly ranked, but he is from the Fatoa region. I'm not... I'm not really sure what to say then. I hope he's still alive. He's alive. I found him, in fact. Wait. Wait, why can't I meet him then? That's a secret. I hate this book. I hate this book. I hate this book. Fitz grinned toothfully once again, which made Rudius' heart pound. I hate it all. I hate all this. Just keep hinting at it. I'm sick of it. At this point, Rudius clarified the criteria. They needed a child around 5 years old, a dwarf with dexterous hands, and they need to be a cute little girl. Yeah, yes, that last one was Rudius's idea. It was Rudius's preference that it would be a cute little girl, which the both of them scolded him about it, which he's like, am I the only guy here that would be okay with that? I mean, he doesn't understand why these other two dudes are not like, yeah, obviously it needs to be a cute little girl. You would think that at least Zenoba would be okay with it. He likes cute little dolls, so why not a cute little girl? At this point, Rudius had considered the fact that he's technically taught a 5-year-old before, Sylphie, and he was kind of wondering how she'd been doing. Sylphie had elf blood in her, and she would be about 15 right now. He figured that by now she had grown into a green-haired beauty, and judging by what Paul said earlier, her skills in magic was really advanced. Her fame should be spreading far and wide. And I'd know her in an instant if I saw her. I was sure. That's what he says. Sure, Rudius. Sure. But he hadn't heard a whisper about her. He wondered where she was right now. I wonder, Rudius. This cuts to the information center where they go up to this macho-looking guy behind the counter. Rudius starts to try to ask him about a specific person they're looking for, and the guy immediately ignored Rudius and started talking to Zenoba. And just starts divulging all this information, asking what he wants, and then Zenoba just slugged the dude. Slugged him because he was ignoring his master. The guards quickly rushed up and they tried to, grab Zenoba, but he just kind of shrugged them off, like just effortlessly. And Rudius immediately turned and started apologizing to the guards, like, sorry about my guy right here. Sorry about that. And they kind of seemed like they accepted the apology because they were just terrified of him. Like, they had fear in their eyes. So like, yeah, just chill out. Continue their conversation, they pretty much laid out what they needed with the macho man. He's checking through his inventory. He ended up finding a dwarf girl, 6 years of age. Her whole family was sold off due to their parents' debt. Not the best of health, maybe malnourished, She can't speak human tongue, and she can't read either. Still, they decided they'd meet the girl, which a man was called to them. He introduced himself as Fabrito, branch manager of the Domani group, subsidiary of the Rium group. When Rudius introduced himself, the guy immediately recognized him as Rudius the Quagmire. So his name finally hits somebody around here. The one who took out the straggler. Rudius explained the situation to the man, but the guy hesitated. He had a feeling that this particular girl would not be of use to them. But still, they wanted to meet her. They went back to the storage area, which was filled with cages, each one of the cages having 1 or 2 people crammed inside of them, filthy and shooting glares of murderous intent. Once back there, Fabrito yelled out to somebody, "Hey, is that one dwarf kid still alive?" "Yep, she's hanging on." They came to a cage in a colder area. In this cage, a girl sat, blank-eyed, with her knees to her chest. They brought her out of the cage. She was thin, shivering, and the men stripped her naked in order for inspection. The sight of her skeleton body was bad, and Fitz was shaken. However, it was the girl's eyes that concerned Rudius. Those empty eyes. He'd seen them before. As you can see, she's a dwarf, 6 years old, so she doesn't really have any skills to speak of. Both of her parents were dwarves. Her father was a smith, her mother crafted jewelry. She should have the dexterous hands you desire, assuming she's inherited their skills. But the only language she knows is Beast God tongue. We didn't really think we could sell her, so her health isn't in the best condition either. We'll give you a discount on that account. God dang it. Thank you, Refugian. Thank you. Thank you. I honestly hate this because this is one of those aspects that a lot of storytelling loses. This is the brutality of slavery. This is something that shouldn't be shied away from because it reminds you how bad it is. I'm a fan of telling stories that are uncomfortable truths. The idea that this is a reality in this world, that slavery does exist in this world, and it's not pretty. It is not pretty at all, and it's supposed to be not pretty. This is a clear sign right here. We had her. We figured she wouldn't be useful. We figured nobody would buy her, so she's malnourished. She's not being taken care of. They're not bothering giving her medical attention or feeding her properly because she's not going to be useful. She is a product to be sold. That's all she is. She's not even seen as a human being at this point. And that is reality. That's an uncomfortable truth reality in this world. They're not going to feed her and take care of her and keep her in a warm area and treat her illnesses. And that kind of sucks if you think about the fact that they're talking about later on, they'll detox her. They could at least detox her, and they're not doing even that. Why bother? She is pretty much a waste of space right now. She's not even worth the cage that she's put in. And again, that's an uncomfortable truth. It's a reality of this world. And because Refugian doesn't hide from that, it seems more real. It sucks. I hate it. It breaks my heart. But that's reality. And a writer should never hide from reality. As difficult it is to read, as difficult it is to watch, as difficult it is to stomach, it is a reality. And she's broken goods, so you get a discount. Reality. Master Fitz looked troubled as she approached the girl, putting her hand on her cheek. After a few seconds, her complexion improved a little bit. He's probably casting something on her, probably healing her. The guy spoke up again. And she's a virgin, of course. So you needn't worry about her having sexually transmitted diseases for the future. We'll detox her just in case, if you decide to buy her. Though I can't really recommend it. Master Fitz looked at Rudius like a child that had found an abandoned puppy. And brought it home with them. The girl honestly met the criteria, but those eyes really bothered Rudius. Rudius had to check for himself. "Hello there, miss." He knelt down and talked to her in beast tongue. First, a conversation, an interview. "My name is Rudius. What is yours?" No reply. "You see, there's something I'd like you to do." No reply. She just stared at him with blank eyes. Fabrito's man quickly reached for his whip, but Rudius stopped him with his hand. "Master, what is it?" She's lost all hope. She's got the look of someone who doesn't want to live anymore. "You've seen someone like that before?" "Many times. Long ago." I immediately knew what he was... I didn't have to read further, and I immediately knew what he was talking about. He's talking about that face that he's seen every time he looked in the mirror when he was in his previous life. That face. Those eyes. I'm gonna start getting emotional. I got emotional when I read this. Rudius spoke to her again in beast tongue. "Do you not want to live anymore?" She didn't reply. You feel like everything's hopeless. I understand what that's like. She didn't respond. "If it's that bad, should I just end it for you?" Rudius' tone was lighthearted, but he meant what he said. There had been a time when he genuinely wanted to die, and then he didn't. He had kept living for a long, long time, and he'd come to regret it. He couldn't save the girl. He could buy her clothes, he could feed her, he could even offer some kind words. But he knew better than anyone that that didn't equate to saving her. It wasn't saving a person to force them into something they didn't want. If that were the case, it was better to end it for her. If, like Rudius, she could die and be reborn in a better life, it might be best for her to call this one quits and try harder the next one. There was a lot of people out there who, for their own self-satisfaction, believed in platitudes like, you can do it if you put your mind to it. This girl was still young. She was just a child after all. Things might get better for her as long as she gave it her all. Or at least that's what Rudius wanted to say. But he couldn't do it. Even though he had continuously been told the same thing, nothing short of death had cured Rudius' stupidity. Rudius had no idea whether this girl was the same as him. Ultimately, it all came down to whether the person concerned had the will to keep trying. Rudius couldn't make that decision for her. There's so much to unpack here, it's not even funny. It's one of those hard realities of, like, I can't argue with Rudius, but at the same time, I can argue with Rudius. From his perspective, it makes perfect sense. This is a perspective of somebody that I've died. I was stuck here, and I hated the fact that I kept going, and I regret keep going. Like, in his previous life, he kept going. He kept going. He kept being told things will get better, and he was stuck there. And he fully acknowledges the fact that even though he was told that it would get better, that he himself screwed up. Death was his only way of fixing his stupidity. It was his own stupidity that kept him stuck. But yet, yes, he does acknowledge the idea that he sort of wishes they stopped earlier. It sort of implies that it would have been better if I died a long time ago, rather than live through that hell that I did before I finally died and had this new life that I could try harder. I understand his mentality. And again, this is another one of those uncomfortable truths. It's not a good state to be, and these aren't good words. In my opinion, my own personal opinion, my own experiences, these aren't good words. These are not. This assumes that you can retry. This assumes that there is a reset button. Rudius understands there's a reset button, at least for him. Now, I would argue against his statements here in the idea that Rudius, what if she doesn't get a second shot? You got a second chance, but will she get a second chance? You're an anomaly, dude. But still, it's kind of a struggle watching him talk about this as if he understands her. Like, this girl is going through much worse things than you are, Rudius. You had a home. You were fed. You had a place to stay. You were kept warm. You had endless amounts of entertainment, online entertainment. You kept yourself busy. You were entertained. You had TV shows to watch. You were scraping through online, doing stuff with yourself. This girl's been stuck in a cage, sold by her parents, or sold off because her parents were all sold off too. She's lost everything. She's in a much worse spot than you are, dude. It's kind of annoying, the idea that he's equating himself to somebody who's honestly going through hell. There's no way that I could ever equate myself to what she's going through. To a child, 6 years old, lost everything, sitting in a cage, starving, probably sick, and just freezing to death. Being told that she's probably never going to sell, and they're probably going to leave her in there until she's dead. I understand what Rudius is thinking here. I understand that he feels like her eyes are the same as mine, and I wanted to give up then too. I can give you that shot. I can let you reset. Again, from the mindset of somebody who thinks that you're going to reset. I'll just kill you and you can start over. That's a really warped mindset to be in. It makes me afraid. This honestly makes me afraid of Rudius in the future. If Rudius is going to run into a situation where somebody close to him is suffering and he thinks that instead of trying to seek a saving point, I will just... he has a reset mentality. He has a reincarnated mentality that, oh, it's okay. I'll just get rid of you and then you can start over. No, Rudius. It's a really bad mindset to be in. Again, you should always take the perspective that you are an anomaly. You are not like everybody. You got this second chance. And that's not going to be the same for everybody. It's a very scary mindset for him to be in. And I'm afraid of what that's going to be in the future. At least for here, thankfully, she says, I don't want to die. Because I think, honestly, he would have done it. And it's sad because two things here. Again, this is like my mind's going anywhere. my mind's going anywhere. This is a very scary chapter, by the way. He will not pull the trigger. He will not end this girl's life. And that will not be the start of, again, like I said earlier, a bad mindset of Rudius, which I think he's going to keep to. But at the same time, she, speaking up, gives her the option to continue on, to hopefully find a better future. She is still very young. And unlike Rudius, with his high school days being bullied and going and becoming a NEET, this girl is going to go from a life of being locked up in a cage, starving to death, to hopefully amounting to something, having some sort of life going forward. And again, I hate the idea of equating the two of their lives because, and essentially him allowing her to live, she will still be somebody's slave. She's going to be Zenoba's slave. She's going to do whatever he tells her to do for this point on. Yes, she could earn her way out of servitude, but that's her life. This is not the same as you. The eyes, yes, equates them, but everything else outside of this is not the same. The circumstances, what she's going through, what she will go through, and what would happen if she died. This is not you, Rudius. Again, I respect that Rudius sees her in his eyes. Because again, he's talking about the eyes that he's seen over and over again in the mirror. But you're not the same. And you should never view that other circumstances will be the same. It's a very scary freaking paragraph. This paragraph scared me. It is a very, very touchy subject. It's very difficult to handle. And again, I give massive credit to Refugin for handling this. I am perfectly fine with Rudius thinking this. Again, it's an uncomfortable truth. It is a truth that he believes. And I'm perfectly fine with reading something that I don't agree with. It hurts. It's a very tough subject. It hits very... I would imagine that hopefully not too large of a portion of people that are watching this premiere right now and will watch the VOD later that have experienced what this is talking about. It is not a comfortable subject. I like, though, that at least at some point in here, he's sort of believing that the reset was the only cure for his own stupidity. So he's at least acknowledging that there is one significant thing that made his life so different, and that she probably won't face that. If she continues on, she might find better things. But for me personally, I had to reset to get rid of that stupidity I had. He was a NEET for his whole life, and it wasn't until he ended it that he finally got away from it. And he kind of figures, hey, you could probably do better next time. Again, that's a scary place to be in. One of the more interesting things about this whole segment is that not a single person there even knew what they were talking about. Again, because he's speaking in beast tongue, and he's asking her, do you not want to live anymore? And she's like, she finally speaks up, but again, nobody there knew what they were talking about. He was literally giving her an option of dying as Fitz is standing there. Fitz would not be okay with it, you know that. Zenoba would probably like, whatever you want to do, master. I don't even think Zenoba would really care. I mean, he's probably dealt with plenty of slaves when he was working, at the Shrone Palace. But this is heavy. This is an extremely heavy moment right here that only Rudius and she knew about. But it's at least acknowledging the fact that no matter if I get her clothes and I feed her and I give her everything she needs, it's not like she's going to get fixed. That's honestly a good thing to acknowledge. It's, again, another thing that puts a good nature to something that, again, is an uncomfortable truth. They are in a slave market, and it's not making it into some sort of glorious transaction. He's not coming in. We're not going, okay, here's a slave trade, and they go in the back, and there's the crippled poor little girl, and she needs to be saved, and Rudius saves her. And they run off to the clothing department, and they get him all clothed up, and they run off to the diner, and they fill her full of food, and she's suddenly super happy. No. Rudius here is acknowledging, I can give her all those things. Like, before we even get to all that, I can give her all those things, and in the end, she'll still be unhappy. I could end it right now. Again, I'm done. I'm done. This segment hurt. This segment broke me. This segment really did break me. And again, I said I was done, but then I seen this one segment. I want to talk about it. I do, again, appreciate from Rudy's perspective that he has been told countless times, you can do it if you put your mind to it. And he failed it, obviously. And he acknowledges that it took his death to break his stupidity. So he at least acknowledges that people told him it would be better. It didn't. I was suffering, and then I died. I don't think it's wrong for people to say you can do it if you put your mind to it. I don't think it's for people's own self-satisfaction, for the most part, to say that you can do it. If you're in a dark place and somebody says you can do it, things will get better, sometimes that's from a position of experience. I've been through it. There's a lot of people that have been through it. It's not to say that your fix is the same for another person's fix. It's more to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And you might still stumble 15 more times, but the idea is that fighting for it, when you finally gain it, it makes it all the sweeter. Anyways, moving on. Rudius finally speaks up again. Say something. I don't want to die. At this point, Rudius accepted that. We'll buy her. Rudius at this point wrapped her up in his robes, used some magic to warm her up, and chanted detoxification. Mr. Fabrito, how much? In the end, she ended up costing 10 Asra large copper coins, which is not really much. But again, they didn't think they were going to sell her. At this point, they washed her up, and they headed to the Commerce District to buy clothes and necessities. They then headed to a ritzy cafe Fitz suggested. Master Fitz seemed to be in good spirits. Glad you like it, he said as he stroked the girl's head. By the way, Rudius, what is her name? Rudius at this point asked her what her name was in Beast tongue. The girl responded, the child of Bazaar, of the Holy Steel, and Lilitella of the beautiful Snow Ridge. According to Fitz, dwarves don't get an official name until they're 7. At that point, they'll kind of fashion it to something that they are good at or they're attracted to. Then why did you ask, Fitz? I like how Fitz asked what his name was, and then he asks, and then she says, like, what basically her parents are, and then tells Fitz, and Fitz is like, oh, they don't get that name yet. We already knew that she was 6. I guess they could have assumed that maybe the slave traders gave her a name. They decided to give her a name, but the girl didn't respond to requests for preference. She's a little girl, so let's give her a cute name, Fitz said. Rudius honestly felt like Fitz's response was something a girl would say. Rudius, on the other hand, wanted to give her a tough-sounding name. Zenova, let's hear your opinion. Are you sure it's all right for me to decide? Well, you're the one that funded the venture. Then Julius it is. Isn't that a boy's name? Yes. It was the name of my poor little brother. The one I killed when I misjudged my strength. Oof. Oof. I totally forgot the guy's name until he mentioned it right here. It's like, oof. Oh, Zenova, oof. Isn't that kind of telling that at this point, he at least acknowledges that he made a mistake? Again, he technically loved his brother. He thought he was gorgeous. He peeked over the carriage and everybody's like, oh, look at them. And then he killed him. It's not something he wanted. He misjudged his power. He misjudged his strength. And so now he kind of wants to continue that name on. I don't know if it's something he just wants to carry on as a legacy or what. But poor little brother, the one I killed when I misjudged my own strength. Zenova, it gets my heart. She'll be staying in my room, won't she? She should bear the name that I would feel connection with. Well, that's fine. But at least make it Juliet. She's a girl, after all. That's fine with me. Juliet it is, then. Juliet? That's a good name, Fitz said. Rudius then spoke in beast tongue. From today on, you will be Juliet. Juliet. Close enough. This is so adorable. This is so adorable. Yes, I'm looking forward to the adventures of Zenova and Juliet. Please, Zenova, don't hurt her. Please, Zenova, don't hurt her. As Zenova and Rudius began training her, over time, she would slowly follow after and support him in various aspects of his life, or his otherwise messy life, as Rudius puts it. At night, Rudius tutored her in voiceless casting and human tongue. Before she went to bed, Zenova would brainwash her. Rudius says, instruct her in the means of rambling lectures on dolls and figurines. He wants to instill upon her the very importance of the task that she has ultimately. He also made her go through dexterity and developing exercises with him, probably because he still wanted to be able to make figurines by himself one day. So even in the end, after all of this, and getting Julie and going to train her, he's still dead set on the fact that hopefully one day I'll be able to make them just like Master. Just like Master. I will say that, like, despite how dark this whole concept is about buying slaves, teaching them skills, and then having them pretty much produce what you want to produce in the end, even with how dark that sounds, like, the immediate thought in my head goes into, yes, what exactly Ruiz is doing here. The idea of actually going out, buying a whole bunch of, like, 5-year-old dwarf kids, and then having them create this big mass assembly line of figurines, which, you know, that's immediately the thought process that Ruiz goes into. I mean, he was thinking about that with Zenoba. I could have him just, like, create this assembly line of creating figurines, get into the royal family to get paints, and just create a whole bunch of figurines of Roxy. You know, that's what... I wonder if that's eventually where they're going to get to, is suddenly, like, in some time in the future, you're going to have literally Zenoba figurine... Zenoba Smile Company. Zenoba Smile Company will become a thing in the world of Mushoku Tensei. At some point down the road, you're going to be going to a marketplace, and there's going to be a Roxy figurine sitting there, and it's just going to have Zenoba Smile Company. And then they'll have, like, on the back of it, cute little pictures of dwarf girls making figurines and spray painting them. Hey, as long as they're taken care of, and they're fed, and they're happy, and they're all that kind of stuff, whatever, it's a lot better life than they probably could have get into with some other owner. I don't know. Zenoba would probably take good care of them, as long as he names them all Juliet and Julie and stuff. Good stuff, though. Good stuff. That's the end of chapter 6, and fantastic. Again, chapter 6 was a massive gut punch, and it is interesting because, like, even despite certain situations, like the whole scene with him giving up after the fight with Sarah, and with everything else that's happened, the first breakup with Edis, when Edis left him, that hit. I don't know why, but that was, like, just the way that it was worded out hurt. Like, it really did hurt. And I think it's more of an idea because it's Rudius believing, or at least giving an option to a young child. It is not so much someone themselves choosing that based on what they're going through. It's a little different than somebody offering somebody else that option when that somebody else is probably not in the state that they should be making that decision. It gets into some really complicated and very heavy subjects, but again, that's what I like about this story. Refugien, this guy, he's all about uncomfortable truths. Ever since I first started watching Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, the animated series, I immediately knew this guy likes uncomfortable truths. It is a shut-in, deadbeat NEET that dies, is transported to another world. He's a pervert. He's constantly throwing underwear on his head. He's thinking about Sylphie. He's thinking about Edis. He's doing inappropriate things to Edis. All these things are uncomfortable truths as to the disgusting nature of this middle-aged man transported to another world, and he's a sicko. But over time, he's changing. And that's what makes it an endearing story in the long run, is because he is gradually changing. And his mindset, his old perverted mindset, is slowly disappearing as he gains a more mature life. He's finally able to grow up. That was the whole point. He's finally able to grow up. He was a man-child in the previous life. And this is another segment of it. Another segment of uncomfortable truths of this world, the slave trade, and yes, even him giving the option to this kid to stop, to start over. It's a scary thought. And again, it's him assuming she'll have another shot. And yes, technically it goes into Buddhist religion and all that kind of stuff, the rebirth and all that kind of stuff, but still, Ruiz has an experience that might be specific to him. And it's scary to think that he can give that option to somebody else. But again, it does lead credit to his acknowledging the fact that he doesn't have a magic button. I can't just save your life by just bringing you in. It's not glorifying that he's going to feed and clothe her and her life's just going to be suddenly wonderful. But yeah. Good stuff. It's absolutely good stuff. But yes, that's where I'm going to wrap it up for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Mondays. As depressing as this Mushoku Mondays was, my gosh, I almost feel like I wish that I went into Chapter 7 because that was just a really heavy point to leave it off on. But just know if you're out there and you're struggling like that, there's people out there. Reach out to somebody that you know and trust. It's always definitely worth it. You are worth it more than you know. Out there, you have somebody that loves you, somebody that cares for you. Don't ever think otherwise. And Rudius would claim that's me saying it out of self-satisfaction, but I truly honestly believe it. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Mondays. If you did, make sure to, before you leave, go down below and hit that like button. I appreciate you guys so much. Leave a comment just to get us in the algorithm. Again, if you have some time, share this video out to your friends so you can spread the word of Mushoku Mondays. It's been so much fun. The premieres every single week have been a blast. I greatly appreciate everybody and their support. Love talking to you guys in the chat. Additionally, if you've not yet, go down in the description below. There is a link to our Discord where we have a Mushoku Monday channel where you can go there and continue to talk. And as per usual, I greatly appreciate everybody that supports us through our Patreon, our tips link, our super thanks, and yes, those that support us through the YouTube channel itself by memberships. I greatly appreciate all of you guys. And until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. And the girl responded, the child a bazaar, and the holy steel and Litelia. Oh my gosh.